Good evening, everybody. Um, First, I want to thank everybody. Let me just pop on here for a minute. There we go. Hopefully, you can see my camera. But I wanted to just pop on camera real quick. Thank everybody for joining us here tonight. And if you're watching the replay, thank you for watching the replay. I certainly appreciate it. But I wanted to take some time because dealing with patients with multiple insurance plans is probably the number one thing that's discussed in my Facebook group, which is where I'm sure a lot of you are from. But it's something that is discussed, that's questioned. Probably 30% of the questions in the group are just about that topic. So I thought it was about time to hop on, do another webinar about it. Um, Usually this webinar sells out very quickly. This time I was able to extend it, so we got a full 1,000 attendee space, which is great. So, a couple things real quick as we're going through. I am going to be watching the question and answer part of the webinar. So if you are here live with us um, on Wednesday night, please ask your questions. If you're watching the replay, you can certainly um, email me over with questions. My contact info will be at the end of the webinar, my email address. You can always Facebook message me or just post them and ask them in the group. Um, so somebody said the cutting in and out. Hopefully it's not. Now I just moved my mic a little. Hopefully that gets better. So I'm gonna kill the video here, and I got it, Katie. I hope you can hear me. But we're gonna kill the video and go right into the webinar. So tonight we want to talk about um, dealing with patients that have multiple insurance plans. And like I said, that's always something that there's a lot of questions about because there's so many different types of coordination. There's different ways they pay. There's different rules on who gets what, if there's an overpayment. So let me just do that. So I wanted to talk about that. Like I said, ask questions you have in the Q&A. If they're live questions, if you're asking them now, I will answer them. We saved a little bit of time at the end of this webinar for questions and answers at the end. So we're going to get through it. And if I don't answer your question in the middle of the webinar, I definitely will as we get towards the end. So, we are here to talk about managing patients with multiple insurance plans. And I love patients with multiple insurance plans because I can actually make more money. And we're going to talk about that later on. But even if I'm in network with one or both um, of the insurances, there are times, depending on how the plans coordinate, that we can actually not do any write-off or adjust our write-off to where we can collect more than the lowest allowed amount. So I love patients with multiple insurance plans. I hear so many people complain about them. I hear so many people um, say, oh, we don't want to deal with secondaries and tertiaries. I love them because they give me the opportunity to collect more than the allowed fee, depending on how the plans coordinate. And we're going to talk about that. Just so everybody is aware, the recording of this webinar will be available, probably be tomorrow until I can get it uploaded. But once it's uploaded onto YouTube with a private link, I'll be emailing out to all the registered attendees of the class with that private link on YouTube so you can rewatch it as many times as you like. So, the first thing we really need to talk about is the different types of insurance plans that there are. So naturally, the ones we all kind of think of are commercial plans. They can be through a current employer. They can be a commercial plan that you purchase directly through an agent or from an online website, the healthcare.gov. You could have it through an employer, through yourself, through your spouse, through a second job. Then we have commercial plans that are self-funded plans. If you are not sure what a self-funded plan is, please, please, please take a look through the group and make sure you understand self-funded plans, because they really now they do represent the majority of plans and have a lot of very strange things that they are exempt from and that apply specifically to them. Give me just 1 second, because I have somebody saying they can only hear 1 out of every 5 words, but I've gotten about 8 other messages in the Q&A from people saying it's good, we can hear it, everything is good. So Katie, if you want to try, hop out and then rejoin the meeting. Sometimes that works. But in the meantime, it is going to be recorded. So, you can definitely get that, but I have a lot of people saying they can hear and everything is good. So it could be just your connection. So now moving on, COBRA plans. COBRA plans, which we all know are through a previous employer, their prior coverage. Then you have retiree plans, which retiree plans are just that, plans for retirees. Supplemental plans, these are things we think of like Aflac. This isn't a Medicare supplement plan, but a supplemental plan like Aflac that is just literally a supplement plan, usually flat rated, but it's a type of possible plan. Medical plans with embedded dental benefits. These are primarily for children, for dependents under the age of 18. Part of the Affordable Care Act was that health insurance plans had to offer both vision and dental benefits for dependents under the age of 18. So now we have some embedded dental benefit plans within health insurance plans. Then finally, we have Medicare and Medicaid plans. Medicare, hopefully we all know what Medicare is, includes Medicare Advantage plans. And then Medicaid plans are state and federally funded Medicaid plans. So those are the different types of plans, and they all coordinate differently. That's the issue with them, is all the different types of plans coordinate differently. So, we have to understand why that is and how that happens. But the first thing, after looking at what all these plan types are, is really understanding their order of ranking. How do we know which one is going to be primary, which one is going to be secondary, which one is going to be tertiary? Commercial employer or individual plans are always primary over a Medicare, a COBRA or retiree, or a Medicaid plan. They are always going to be primary over that. Now, we run into times where a patient has 2 commercial employer plans. Maybe they have one through their employer and one that they are a dependent on their spouse's employer plan. Typically, their employer plan would be first. They are the primary. They are the subscriber on the plan, it makes it their primary. They are a dependent on their spouse's plan, which would make that commercial employer plan their secondary, and vice versa. So if you have two spouses, one is the primary for one and secondary for their spouse, and then the other one, they are primary on their plan and their spouse's secondary is their secondary. Their spouse's coverage is their secondary. So, hopefully that makes sense. Now, what if you have the same subscriber? The subscriber is the same person for both. Typically, when that happens, it will go by the birthday rule. But now we get into children, or I'm sorry, by effective date. Wow. We go by effective date of the plan, whichever plan was effective first when you have the same subscriber for two plans. Whichever one was effective first, the effective date, the beginning date of the plan will be the primary, and the secondary will be the newest plan. Bear in mind that newest plan could be 15 years old, but the other one is 17. So that makes it the secondary just because it's the newer plan. It doesn't have to be brand new, just newer. Now we get into a scenario where we have children, two parents, they're both subscribers on their own plans. They both cover the children, both cover their dependents. Typically, this will follow the birthday rule. The birthday rule says whichever parent was born first in the year is the primary. That doesn't mean whichever parent is older, because you could have one parent that's 3 years older than the other, but the older parent's birthday is in October, the younger parent's birthday is in March. The parent with the March birthday will be the primary if it follows the birthday rule, because their birthday comes first in the year. It's not who's older, it's whose birthday comes first in the year. It goes by birth month. Then, if they're both born in the same month, by day. So that's how that works. Then, under that, we have Medicare supplement plans. Medicare supplement plans are secondary to commercial employer or individual plans, but they are primary over COBRA and retiree plans. There is a very, very helpful chart that really breaks this out, because Medicare has since changed their coordination, that if the employer has under 20 employees, Medicare becomes the primary and the employer plan becomes the secondary. But in general, for most patients, this chart here on the screen is really how it works. And then again, Medicare, including the Medicare supplement and the Medicare Advantage plans, are primary over COBRA and retiree plans. So if you have a patient that has a Medicare Advantage plan and a federal government, say the FEP, they worked for the post office retiree plan, the Medicare Advantage plan will be primary over that retiree plan. If it's a COBRA coverage plan, Medicare will be primary over the COBRA plan. And then finally, as always, the payer of last resort is Medicaid. And, we all know what Medicaid is. It is 100% of the time the payer of last resort. And we're going to talk about that a little later on, but you have to understand that Medicaid is always the payer of last resort. Now we talk about the different types of coordination, because it's literally dozens of different types of coordination, but they typically fall into one of three or four categories. So the first type of coordination is traditional coordination. This is what we think of when we think of coordination of benefits. Anybody who's been in dentistry for 10, 15, 20 years, this is what you think of when you think of coordination of benefits. It's the old way it used to be. It was wonderful 15 years ago. It was fantastic. Patients can receive up to 100% reimbursement. So if the primary paid 50% and the secondary paid 50%, they both paid. The office got paid 100%. The patient owed nothing and they were happy. And they knew why they were paying for their secondary because it was an actual benefit to them. Patient had a crown, primary pays 50, secondary pays 50%, 50 plus 50 is 100%. And patients loved it and offices loved it. And it was easy because it was how coordination worked. Now we have dozens of other ways. We have now carve out coordination, which says the secondary determines what it would have paid if it was the primary, then subtracts the primary payment from that amount. I do have examples of these towards the end of the presentation. We have EOBs and screenshots, and we're going to go through them, but I want everybody to understand what they all are. So when you're doing a verification on a secondary plan, one of your verification questions should be, what type of coordination does this plan follow? Does it follow traditional? Does it follow carve-out coordination, maintenance of benefits? That should be one of the questions when you're verifying secondary coverage. But carve-out says we're going to decide what we would have paid if we were the primary. So say the secondary says we would have paid $150 for this service if we were the primary, but we're not. So the primary paid 140, we would have paid 150. Here's $10 because we're going to pay the difference between what we would have paid and what the primary paid. That is carve-out coordination. Maintenance of benefit coordination is when the secondary considers the primary payment. So we're back to that service. The secondary would have paid $150, but the primary already paid $140. So now the secondary is going to apply a deductible and any co-insurance percentages to that $10. So if it's a 80% covered service, they're going to say, we would have paid $150, they paid $140, we would pay $10, but it's covered at 80%, so here's $8. And the patient's going to owe that $2 difference so long as the lowest allowed amount is more than $148, which is what you've collected from the two plans. Patients that have a maintenance of benefit plan will very, very typically have an out-of-pocket expense after primary and secondary make payment. So, because they're applying that percentage and the deductible to the secondary payment, they are very often going to have an out-of-pocket expense based on that. Then we run into non-duplication. Non-duplication says, and there's a question here, carve out and non-duplication are the same thing, right? They're close. Non-duplication is if the primary paid the same or more than what the secondary would have paid if it were primary, no payment is made by the secondary. So what that means is this isn't always a dollar amount. This is oftentimes a percentage basis. So we'll use this same scenario. Primary pays 140 towards a service, which is 100% of their allowed fee. The secondary would have paid 150 if it were primary, but because it's a non-dupe and because the primary already paid 100% of their allowed fee, the secondary pays nothing, not even that $10 or the $8 from the previous examples. It pays nothing because it's matching the percentage. And because the primary already paid 100% of their allowed fee, the secondary says there's nothing else for us to pay, not even that $10, because you've already been paid 100% of the allowed fee by the primary. We consider it paid in full. And this is how the majority of self-funded plans work. Remember, I said earlier, self-funded plans are important to understand when you're talking about coordination of benefits because they have a lot of weird, funky rules. And yes, traditional is the same verbiage as standard coordination. That standard and traditional are the same thing, same wording. But these non-dupe plans, again, is how the majority of self-funded plans work, because those self-funded plans, even though it says self-funded, remember, self-funded plans are funded by the employer. Self-funded plans are not individual plans that a patient pays for the premiums themselves. They are employer plans, and the employer is responsible for making the claim payments, which is why the majority of self-funded plans have a non-duplication of benefits clause, because it's actually the employer paying those claims. It's not the insurance company. The money, the claim payments are coming from the employer. So they don't want to spend any more than they have to. And as a business owner, as the employer, you can certainly understand that. If it was your business, you wouldn't want to pay more than you had to either. So that's the way it works. But one of the important things to note about self-funded plans, and I know we talk about this a lot in the group, is that self-funded plans are exempt from state law. So why is this important when we talk about coordination of benefits or really anything that has to do with collecting outstanding claims? Number one, because they're exempt from state law, they don't have to pay you interest on a delayed payment of a claim. So every state has a rule that says if a claim is not paid within 30 days, 45 days, 60 days, just depending on the state, the insurance company has to pay you interest. We've all gotten those couple penny interest payments in the mail, and you go, oh my gosh, why did I just get a check for 9 cents? It cost them more for the stamp than it did to pay me the 9 cents. That's interest that is due per your state law. Except self-funded plans are exempt from state laws, and federally, which is it's federal law that self-funded plans follow, federally, there is no interest payment required when a patient or when a payment is late, is more than 30 days, 45 days, et cetera, et cetera. So very important for people to understand. Also important for you to understand is that self-funded plans if they follow traditional or standard coordination, if they overpay over the office's full office fee. Because remember, I said, even if you're in network with one or both of the patient's insurances, if they have multiple plans, there are times when you can collect over your lowest allowed fee. Sometimes the two plans together will pay over your full office fee. That you don't get to keep. If you charge $100 for a service and one insurance pays $75 and the other insurance pays $75, you've now collected $150 for that $100 service. First step is to call the secondary and ensure that they followed their proper coordination of benefits policy. If they did, and they took into account, or they completely ignore, like Medicare Advantage plans, do not coordinate at all. They always pay as though they are primary. So you may collect $150 for that $100 service. If either one of the two plans is self-funded or a Medicare Advantage plan, that $50 you collected over your full office fee actually belongs to the patient. Yes, there are absolutely scenarios where a patient can profit by going to the dentist. It happens every day. It is 100% perfectly legal in all 50 states and the District of Columbia, and it happens. So you have to be prepared for that. But first, before I give that credit to the patient, I'm going to call the secondary. I'm going to confirm that they followed their coordination of benefits policy. If they did, and it truly is an overpayment due to whatever coordination policy they follow, that money belongs to the patient. So I love that, because you know how easy it is to get patients to accept treatment when they know by getting that crown, they're going to get paid $100 for getting a crown. That's a wonderful deal for the patient. And the office gets to collect up to your full fee. You don't have to do a write-off, even if you're in network. And that is why I love patients with multiple insurance plans. So, we talked about this already. Employer plans, current employer plans are always the primary. If they have two current employers, the plan first in effect becomes the primary, the new plan's the secondary. We already talked about that. When dependents are covered by two plans, the primary is determined by the birthday rule for dependents, whichever subscriber birthday is earlier in the year. One important thing to note about that: divorce decrees and custody agreements can override the birthday rule. So you could have one parent whose birthday is in January, another whose birthday is in December. But if the divorce decree or the custody agreement says the parent whose birthday is in December is responsible for providing primary coverage, that becomes the primary. What I will tell you is I don't get involved in divorce decrees or custody agreements. If the insurance company has a question, if they have a problem, if they are not coordinating properly per what the parents are telling you, have them call the insurance company. Short of a decree or a custody agreement limiting a parent's access to their child's records, I don't want to know what your divorce decree or custody agreement says. I don't want a copy of it. I don't want to know. I don't care. It has nothing to do with me. Well, it says the other parent has to pay all the bills. Well, that's great, but you're the one who brought your child here and who signed our financial agreement. So you are responsible, and then you have to recover it from the other parent. That's the way it works. I do not get involved. I am not a judge. I am not a petitioner. I do not want anything to do with divorce decrees or custody agreements. But you have to understand that they can override the birthday rule. Medical dental plans. When one of these policies is a medical policy, medical will be the primary over the dental. It could be possible for a child with two parents to have four plans: a primary medical, a secondary medical, a primary dental, and a secondary dental. It does happen, and we are seeing an increase in the number of dental plans requiring certain procedures to be submitted to medical first, mainly for surgical. I saw somebody here raise their hand. If that was an accident, go ahead and put it down. If you do have a question, please make sure you ask your question in the Q&A section, so it'll pop up here for me. But there is a lot of confusion over that, because if the dental plan is requiring it to be submitted to the medical because it was a surgical extraction or maybe a frenectomy or whatever it may have been, you really, really have to make sure you're doing that, because if you don't, you won't get paid from the dental plan. And if you're in network, you can't just say, well, the patient's going to owe, because you didn't follow the documentation requirements of the dental plan. And as an in-network provider, if you don't follow the documentation requirements, you absolutely can't charge the patient anything out of pocket for those services. Now, the question just popped up: if a patient has four plans, are you required to file all four? You are required to file all plans that you are in network with. So if you're in network with Delta and MetLife, and the patient has a Delta primary, MetLife secondary, Delta tertiary, and MetLife quaternary, that fourth one, you are absolutely required to file all four. Whatever you are in network with, you must file. The other thing is, remember the documentation requirements. Even if you're out of network with the primary, you still have to submit to the primary in order to get the EOB to send to the in-network secondary, because that's a documentation requirement. So you're not really forced to, but you kind of are forced to, because because you need the EOB. So I do the same thing with medical. Even though I'm not in network with any medical plans, I'm still going to bill them. I send the CDT, the ADA claim form with the CDT codes to medical. I'm going to get the denial, and then I send the denial to the dental insurances. And that's how you get paid. So, but some plans, the medicals do actually pay on dental. So you really have to pay attention to that. And anything I can do to decrease the patient's out of pocket, increase insurance reimbursement, not only makes me not have to chase patients for money, but it also helps me improve case acceptance, because the patients are going to have less or no out of pocket, which makes it much, much easier for them to accept treatment and move forward with it when it's not costing them anything. You just have to watch no-shows, because if it's not costing them anything, they're not committed. So pay attention to your no-show rate. But if it's not costing you anything, why would you not do it when you need it and it's the best thing for your health? Absolutely, we're going to do it because it costs us nothing and we can afford that. So that is the way it works. So now, just real quick, I want to just answer a couple of the questions because they're about things we just talked about. How do you determine or find out how many employees a plan has if it's a spouse's plan, Medicare Advantage? Medicare will know, and they will know if they are the primary or secondary. So I call them. I'll call the Medicare Advantage plan and get that question answered. Um, I'm talking about medical riders, but I'm also talking about just medical plans in general. Um, a lot of surgical procedures have to be submitted to a medical plan before dental if the dental plan has a policy in place for that, which many do, and we're actually seeing an increase in that. What if the provider is not in network with the primary? Primary does not allow out of network benefits. Do you still have to send a claim? You don't have to. You can submit straight to the secondary, but chances are you're going to get a request from the secondary saying, we need the primary EOB. They don't care if you're in or out of network. They know they're the secondary and they want to make sure the primary has paid so they can properly coordinate. So you don't have to because you're not in network, but there's a good chance you're not going to get paid by the secondary until you have that primary EOB. So you don't have to, but you really should. Can you charge the patient if you're out of network with their insurances, or do you still have to bill medical? If you're out of network with all of that patient, they have two plans and you're out of network with both. Honestly, I already wouldn't have been doing it. I would have collected in full from the patient at the time of service, had assignment of benefits for both plans that I'm out of network with, go straight to the patient, and then you don't have to worry about it, Jasmine. It makes your life that much easier. Billing medical, just so everybody understands, is really very simple if you're not doing it to maximize reimbursement. If you are, by all means, please learn how to bill medical properly. But if you're doing it like most of us are to get the denial EOB to send to the dental plan, you send the medical insurance and you'll have to mail it typically. Send them a printed out ADA claim form, just like you would any other insurance, with the CDT codes. They'll get that. They'll most likely deny it. You send that denial to the dental insurance and you're good to go. And yes, Gayla just answered that. Send a dental claim to a medical policy. Absolutely. What if both insurances think they are secondary and are not paying? That is a scenario where the patient has to get involved. Involve the patient. Oh, but we've called them and they haven't called us back. What do we do? Close all the claims and send the patient a bill. Bills get people to call you. I always, if I can't get a return phone call, I always send them a bill because then I know they'll call me. And if they don't call me, they're going to pay it. And if they don't do either, I'm going to have to chase them down for the money and they go into my collections process. So it makes things easier and you get more of a quicker response if you just send them a bill. So contrary to that, where both were saying they were secondary, what happens if both are saying they are primary? There are plan types who do not coordinate and always pay as though they are primary. If either one of those plans are self-funded or a Medicare plan, that credit over your full office fee belongs to the patient. You have to verify both plans consider themselves primary. But once you do, any amount paid over your full office fee belongs to the patient. That credit actually belongs to the patient. All right. So I'm going to skip over a couple of these because we're going to get through them and we'll talk about them towards the end. So, who is where, as we talked about before, Medicaid plans are the last insurance to pay. They are the payer of last resort. Typically, Medicaid patients have no out-of-pocket expenses. Naturally, there are exceptions, where you might have an adult patient with a very small copay, a couple bucks here or there, or it could be flat rated per visit. But outside of that, it's not charged. Medicaid plans are typically very good at coordinating benefits. And if they know that the primary already paid more than the Medicaid allowance, you're going to get paid zero and you'll have to write off down to that. But think about it this way. Medicaid payments are funded by taxpayers. So the less they can spend, the better for all of us on our federal and state budgets. Medicare plans, always secondary to commercial plans, if the employer has 20 or more employees. Under 20, that's where the Medicare Advantage plan becomes the primary. So I want to answer a couple quick questions here before we move on. So do Medicare Advantage plans from different insurers have any ID numbers in common that makes running reports easier? Usually not. They're different. You have to look at them because you could have some that, it's a 5,000 and some that it's a 6,000. And that makes a difference on the plan level and the coverage, but that's only for Blue Cross. Then when you go to Delta, it's a totally different system. So no, the easiest way to do it is to create it as an employer, have a Medicare Advantage Delta plan, Medicare Advantage this plan, Medicare Advantage that plan, and make that the employer for each one of them. And then just have different group numbers for different percentage coverages, different breakdowns. No, they don't like to do anything to make things easy. Can you bill electronically? If you can get the payer ID and your clearinghouse allows it, you absolutely can bill medical electronically. Susan, can you pick and choose which claims to send? Say out of network with both, but primary is Dental Blue and secondary is Cigna. If you're out of network, you can just realize they're going to know about each other. And if you only ever bill the secondary, they're gonna say, where's the primary EOB? Where's the primary EOB? So you can, if you're out of network with both insurances, you can send to one and not the other. But they're typically going to want the other EOB if they're the secondary before they make any payment. Honestly, the easiest way to do it is to collect in full from the patient when you're out of network with both, file both claims at the same time, have assignment of benefits, go to the patient, and you're done. Nothing to chase, nothing to worry about. So we have a patient with primary that we are out of network. We always have to hound the patient for the EOB to send to secondary. Any advice on when to collect for that? I have my patients in that scenario sign a form saying they'll provide it within 30 days. That way I can submit it to the secondary. If they don't, on the 31st day, I close the secondary claim and I send the patient a bill. If a patient owes a deductible from primary, do we collect before we send a secondary? No. And we're going to get to examples of that here shortly. If one overpays, do we send it back to the one that overpaid or send the difference to the patient? It depends. If the primary paid more than your full office fee, that's what they overpaid, then yes, the primary is due that refund no matter what. If the secondary overpays over your full office fee, it will depend on how the plans coordinate and if they are or are not self-funded or federally funded. Self-funded Medicare Advantage plans, they're two different things. Self-funded plans, Medicare Advantage plans, overpayments over your full office fee from the secondary go to the patient. Overpayments from the primary, which I don't know how that's possible, but I guess it could be, always go back to the primary. And it is considered legally the dentist's obligation to alert the insurance company if they have overpaid for a service. So please keep that in mind, that it ultimately does fall on the office, even though we say, well, the insurance company should have looked at the EOB and done it themselves. They should have figured it out. They didn't. It's their fault. You are required, legally responsible for reporting an overpayment and confirming if it is a true overpayment or if it's a coordination of benefits policy that results in the patient receiving a refund. So, submitting the claims. As we all know, you should always be submitting your full fee on claim forms. Never the network fees, never the balances after primary has paid. There's places for that. If everybody is hopefully familiar with CAS coding, that honestly could be its whole own webinar. But that's how we tell the secondary how much the primary has already paid. As long as you're submitting an EOB from the primary, you're doing CAS coding, you're letting the secondary know, you're good. Use your full fee in box 31 on the claim forms for both the primary and the secondary. We know, though, the exception is if you are giving the patient a discount. If you're giving the patient a discount, you bill out the discounted fee on the claim form to both primary and secondary. Because remember, when a patient has two or more plans, you can collect up to your full office fee from the two insurance payments, even if you're in network. If you learn nothing else tonight except that, it's worth it, because I see so many offices that have huge patient credit balances because they're posting allowed fees to the ledger. The two plans are paying more than that, and nobody ever does a debit adjustment to bring that balance up. So please, please, please make sure you're aware of that. Always submit claims to the secondary with the primary EOB attached. Do it as an attachment, take a screenshot, pull it up as a PDF on your monitor, take a screenshot. You can, in all the clearinghouse softwares, use it as an attachment, as a screenshot, label it as EOB, and you're good. When you're submitting claims to a tertiary policy, include the primary and the secondary EOB. I send it the first time, every time. I don't want to wait to get a record request, to get a documentation request. I throw everything I have at them the first time to try to reduce the number of initial rejections. It is certainly not going to eliminate it, but I want to reduce it as much as possible. With that said, I never do adjustments at walkout. I love Love, love, love having my fee schedules in my practice management software, whether it's Open Dental or Dentrix or EagleSoft. I always have my fee schedules entered in the system, linked to the plans, so that on treatment plans and on the ledger, it shows the allowed fee. However, when a patient has multiple insurance plans, I don't want the allowed fee from the primary posting to the ledger or the treatment plans. I remove the fee schedules from those plans, and any adjustments are done after both plans have paid or processed. That is when adjustments get done, after both plans have processed. So how do we do that? We have to stop the auto adjustments. I love them and I want them 100% of the time when a patient only has one plan. But when they have multiple plans, secondary, tertiary, quaternary, I don't want those fee schedules linked. So how do we do that? And this is something I stole from Andre, from Andre's EagleSoft Field Guide. I don't know what happened to my little Andre head that's usually in the upper corner of this slide, but it's gone. But when you have that happen, you create a duplicate plan. So I have in my system a plan called Microsoft. That's the employer. And for all the patients who work for Microsoft who only have one plan, that's all they have, I link it, the fee schedule is attached. It posts the allowed fees to the ledger, to the treatment plans, to my production reports, and it's wonderful. However, if that Microsoft employee has a secondary plan, I don't want the fee schedule attached. So what do? I copy that Microsoft plan. Everything is exactly the same. The payer ID, the address, the percentages of coverage, 80, 50, 100, $50 deductible, all of that is the same. The only difference is I changed the employer to Microsoft 2 or Microsoft SEC for secondary, something that you're going to know. And I remove the fee schedule. Everything is identical, except the name signifies it's for patients with multiple plans. And the fee schedule is not attached to that plan. This will post full fees to the ledger and allow me to do the adjustments after both plans have processed. Because as we go through, you're going to see the math on these, and the patient gets the benefit. Any patient portion is based on the lowest allowed fee schedule. So, if the primary allows 100, the secondary allows 90, any patient portion is going to be based on that $90 allowance. But the way all of the softwares are set up is that if you have fee schedules attached, it's going to only take into account the primary fee schedule. So you're still going to be over quoting and over collecting from the patient when they have two plans. So I want to completely undo that. And if you are an office who does not believe in attaching fee schedules and you do all your adjustments, 100% of them after insurance has paid, that makes it much easier to deal with patients with a secondary. But I'm going to do the math and know that 12% of my patients have multiple plans. I'd rather be right 88% of the time and have to fix it 12% than the other way around. So hopefully that makes sense to everybody. Now, before we move on to some examples, I want to go through quick and answer a couple questions here. Any tips for billing with Dentrix that doesn't allow more than 2 plans if a patient has 3 or more insurances? Unfortunately, if none of them are medical, you're going to have to do them manually. It's unfortunate. It's a shortfall in all the softwares. None of them are really set up for dealing with tertiary or quadriary unless one of them is a medical. Than they are. So it's just you're going to have to do it manually, change it line by line. If you're sending to tertiary, I put the secondary info where primary goes, send them both EOBs as attachments, and they understand. So should we ask insurance if they want to request a refund or if they want us to refund a patient? You can absolutely do that when you're calling. I would just say, did you coordinate properly? You're aware of the primary. Yes, we are. Did you coordinate properly? Yes, we did. If neither of the plans are self or federally funded, then I'm going to tell that rep, okay, you've overpaid. I need a refund request for this amount, and they will send it. If either one of the 2 plans are self-funded, I'm not going to ask the rep for a refund request because that overpayment belongs to the patient. Next question, our office seems to have an issue with sending secondary claims electronically. They seem to constantly miss the attached primary EOB. How do you not have this issue? Sometimes they do. But also remember, sometimes the plans don't actually coordinate. So you really have to take that into account. And until you know which is which do coordinate, which don't, and I do it as an account alert pop up on my software, I'm going to have to call, I'm going to have to walk through the process, confirm it, update my software, do a refund request. If not, give them the NEA attachment ID number. And magically, when you give them that NEA number, typically they can magically find that attachment and process. It also works for x-rays. If they say, we never received the x-ray. Really? Because it's attachment ID number 1234567. Oh, yes, there it is. I see it now. And that happens all the time. So just call them, give them the NEA attachment number. They should be able to find it and get it done. What about coverage books for those secondary employers? You can do that. I personally am not a big fan of coverage books in any software. I'd rather just have the fee schedule and the percentages done properly, so then I don't have to worry about it. Just because I personally am not a fan of coverage books. Excuse me. If you're comfortable with them, you use them frequently, by all means, do it. It's about finding a system that works consistently and is trainable and repeatable. That could be totally different for you than it is for me. So if you're comfortable with coverage books and you use them regularly, please, by all means, use those, figure it out. Just make sure it's coordinating properly and not basing it on just the primary allowed fee. And then the last question, I'm going to save Liz, I'm going to save yours for the end Q&A section here. But the next question, can you just do a debit adjustment after secondary pays to reflect the higher fee? You can, but I find that to be cumbersome. And here's the issue. Hopefully everybody knows that a patient's ledger is part of their record. So if a patient requests a copy of their full record, the ledger is part of that. I don't want to have to explain to a patient who's looking line by line at a ledger why they had a credit and then I did this weird magical adjustment and it made their balance zero. In their mind, they're thinking I had a credit and you stole it. And I really don't want to have to explain that to the patient. So I'd rather do either a credit or a debit adjustment after the fact, or no adjustment at all after the fact, than risk one day having to explain to a patient why I did a debit adjustment when they think I shouldn't have, and now they think I'm stealing from them. They already think all dental offices are greedy. I don't want to give them any reason to question that. Next question. Do you use fee schedules for out-of-network insurance? Nope, I don't. Um, there is no fee schedule for out-of-network. The fee is my fee when you're out of network. It's the full office fee. So there's no fees to use. Coverage books for fees for out-of-network, that's great. It shows you what the patient's balance is going to be. Again, it's much easier for me when I'm out of network to just say, patient, you're going to owe me $300. Your insurance is going to send you a check for I don't know how much. Much, much easier. That truly makes their insurance a contract between them and the insurance company and leaves me out of it. I find the more involved I get, the more involved the patients want me to be. And I really don't want to be involved when I'm out of network. That's the whole reason I went out of network. Excuse me. Oh, last one, then we're going to move on to the examples, and I will answer questions at the end here. If the kids are covered under mom, dad, and step parents and all follow standard coordination, do they just go in birthday order for all three, or does it matter which parent, step parent they live with? I wish I could tell you, Stacy, it's this way, but they're all different and they will fight over who will know. If, mom, dad, and stepmom all have coverage and the kid lives with dad and stepmom, a lot of insurance companies will say it's dad, then stepmom, then mom. Others will say, nope, it's dad, then mom, then stepmom. It just, there isn't a one answer to rule them all kind of answer. It's just, it's dependent on the plan. Is it self-funded? Is it fully funded? What's the insurance company's policy? What does the policy they signed up for say? It's so many different choices. There just isn't one to answer them all. I'm sorry. I wish there was. I really wish insurance companies would all get together, and instead of trying to figure out how to pay less, they'd all get together and figure out how to make our lives easier. I think a lot of us would be okay taking some reduction, write-offs, adjustments when we're in network if they made dealing with them easier. But they underpay and make dealing with them difficult. And it's pick one. Either pay me well and be difficult, or pay me less, but make it super easy for me to do business with you. I say pick one. Insurance companies want both. So just the way it is. So now let's look at this first example. This is for a patient who came in, had a DO-140, a limited exam. The full office fee is $114. The primary's negotiated fee is $56. It's covered at 80%. $50 applied to the deductible. The patient owes $51.20. Here, their secondary, we all know this is Delta. Secondary allows 56, same amount, and paid 56. So technically now I've collected $60.80. So when we look at this, we've collected $60.80 from the insurance. And I just want you all to see that that gray section at the top of the screen is from our secondary insurance calculator. It is available in the group files in the Facebook group. It's also on the resources page of our website. Just go to practicemechanic.com. In the upper right-hand corner, click on resources, and it's there. This will do all of these calculations for you. You put in the office UCR 114, primary allowed 56 and paid $4.80. Secondary allowed 56 and paid 56. I've collected $60.80. I've collected more than either of the plan's allowances. So my adjustment, instead of being a $58 adjustment, my adjustment goes down to $53.20, and I'm collecting more than the lowest allowed fee. So that makes the patient portion zero. So even though in this example, the primary applied a $50 deductible, the secondary payment paid that deductible for the primary. You adjust down to the 60/80, which is the sum of the two insurance payments. And this is why we don't do adjustments in advance. If you had prematurely written off to that primary allowance of $56, right now, before doing any adjustment, the patient's account would show a credit of $4.80 on their ledger. I don't want that to happen. So I'm adjusting 53.20 instead of 58. I'm making, in this case, it's an extra $4.80. Ooh, $4.80. But in some cases with crowns and dentures and bridges and other things, it can be hundreds of dollars. So it's important to understand why the process works this way. So our next example, and hopefully if you're watching this on a phone, I apologize. These are going to be hard to read, but I had to get the actual real life screenshots in there. Primary is Delta. Primary, you see all the numbers here. You see the calculations. You see the payments. Again, review this in the video, the replay, if you want to go back and forth and pause it. But I have all the numbers here. So the secondary in this case used the primary allowed fees because they're lower than the secondary's allowed fees. This is a maintenance of benefits type thing where they're going to use the secondary is using the primary fee because it's lower than their allowed fee. So they're basing their coverage off of that. So the DO 220 was paid in full by the primary, the PA. So the secondary no pays. Patient owes zero for that. You collected the primary allowance in full from the primary. Secondary paid nothing. Patient owes nothing. Your adjustment is $95 because they charge $114 for the DO 220. For a D2950 for the buildup, the primary allowance is $192. They paid $71. The secondary also allowed $192 because they're using the primary's lower allowances, and paid zero because the primary paid already. It already paid the 50% that they would have if they were primary. So now the patient's going to owe $121 towards their buildup. You've collected $71 from insurance, and you're going to do a $48 adjustment to go from my $240 office fee down to the $192 lowest allowance. Patient owes 71. That's that. Next line for the Crown. Our office fee is $996. The primary allowance is $732. And they paid $366, which is 50%. The secondary uses the primary allowance and paid 50%. So you've now collected $732 from the two insurances, which is the primary allowance. The patient owes $0 for the Crown, and you do a $264 write-off. Because the two plans together paid 100% of the lowest allowed fee, the patient owes $0. So even if, and it didn't happen in this case, but even if the primary and the secondary both applied a deductible to that Crown, because the two insurance plan payments are equal or greater than the lowest allowed fee, the patient portion will always be zero. If the two plans paid more than your lowest allowed fee. Bear in mind, please, if you are out of network with a certain insurance company, your allowed fee is your full office fee. When you're out of network, do not take into account what the insurance company allows because you're out of network. Their allowance is immaterial to you. You're out of network, you collect your full fee. So that is the allowed fee when you're out of network. So next one, again, going to be tough to read on a smaller screen. But the primary here paid 100% of its allowed fee. You submitted $76 for that periodic evaluation. The primary allows 39. They paid 39. The secondary allows 36, and it says they paid 36. But when you look at the adjustments due to other insurance on the secondary EOB, they are subtracting their allowed fee, what they would have paid, and paying you zero because the primary insurance paid more than the secondary allows. So here's the breakdown using the calculator, that secondary insurance calculator that's in the group files and on our resources page. Secondary paid zero because the primary already paid more than the secondary allows. You're going to write off down to the primary allowance, which coincidentally is also the sum of the two insurance payments. Remember, it's 169 plus $0 from the secondary. That's the sum. 169 plus 0 is 169. You're going to write off down to the 169. And the patient owes zero. It's paid in full. So now we go to this one. This is for a filling. The charge is $306. Primary adjustment amounts $258. The insurance paid $48. The secondary said, we allow $123. The patient should owe this, but we're paying $0 because the patient has met their annual maximum. You see there, it says for service on September 28th, C note MC. maximum calendar year met. That's what that means. So they're paying zero because the maximum has been met, but they're allowing you to charge the patient $123. But remember, the patient gets the benefit of the lowest allowed fee, which in this case is the primary allowance of $48. Yes, the primary has a very low allowance, super low. But since the primary paid their full allowance, the patient owes $0, even though the secondary states that they owe money. Because remember, the patient portion is always based on the lowest allowed fee. That seemed to have caused a lot of confusion previously. When I say you can collect up to your full office fee from the two insurances, I mean from the two insurance payments. Patient portion will always be based on the lowest allowed fee. Always, always, always. So now, prophy and exam. Patient responsibility is there. Primary insurance paid $53.88 towards the prophy, $27.69 towards the exam. Now you see, look at the secondary down at the bottom. They allowed $82 based on their allowed fees. 47 for the prophy, 35 for the exam. That's $82. But the primary already paid $81.57. So the secondary is taking that into account and paying you the 43-cent difference to bring your total collected up to their allowance, which is very nice of them. So you have to pay attention to the EOB, because if you were just looking, if you were just looking, and let me see if I can pop this open here. If you were just looking here, or I'm sorry, here, let me erase that. You would enter that payment as an $82 payment, not knowing that they actually only paid 43 cents. So it's very important that you understand and you really pay attention to the EOBs. Let me pop this open here. Erase, erase, erase. There we go. So super, super important. Everybody understands that. So remember, the secondary applied the primary overpayment to the secondary allowance. There's your adjustment. Secondary used the total paid by the primary to calculate their payment amount. The patient owes $0. Secondary paid 43 cents. Your total collected amount from the two plans is $82, which is what the secondary allows. So very, very, very important to pay attention to your EOBs and look for that. Because like I said, if you were just looking at the last column of the secondary EOB, you would think that they paid $82. But when you look down further, you see they actually only total benefit paid is 43 cents. So very important to pay attention to that. All right, last one. This is for a whole bunch of fillings, pulp caps, and a core buildup. But I want you to pay special attention, because if you look right here, and I'm going to circle it on the screen. Oh, no, that's the eraser. Right here. Right there. This is a Medicare plan. So it's very important for you to understand this is a Medicare plan. Because you look at the payments, and we're going to look here on the secondary calculator. Primary allowance for each one of the fillings was the full office fee because we are out of network with the primary. This is important. If you take a look right here, you will see the discount amount is $0. We are out of network with the primary. So there is no discount. So remember when I said earlier, when you're using the calculator, when you're out of network, the allowance is your full fee. So our full office fee for a $23.92 is $260.76. The primary allowance is $260.76 for each of those. Same with that, same with the pulp cap, same with the buildup. And we see what the primary paid for each one of those. Bearing in mind, they paid $0 for the pulp caps because they don't allow pulp caps. But we're out of network, so our primary allowance is still our full office fee because their no pulp cap rule doesn't apply to us as an out-of-network provider. The secondary, however, we are in network, and they have allowances. The secondary allowance for those fillings is $157, and they paid $157, which means for my $260 service, I was paid between the primary payment and the secondary payment $365.61, which is $104.85 over my full office fee. All of these negatives, negative 104, negative 104, negative 104, negative 104, belong to the patient. This is, remember, a Medicare plan. Medicare Advantage plans do not coordinate, and the overpayment belongs to the patient. Now, it's going to be on their account, and they owe me $21 for each pulp cap, and they owe me $109 for the buildup. So they're going to have $104.85 times 4 as a credit. They're going to have this as a balance. I'm going to subtract the two. I'm going to get paid my 21, 24, 21, 24, 109, 44 from the from the credit, and then refund the patient the difference. So, very important to do, and to know that the two plans payments could result in an overpayment that the patient gets to keep. That is their money. So very, very important for people to understand. So now we're going to move into questions because I know we are almost out of time. But let's see, let me go back one and then slide over here to the questions. First question: when we receive interest payment from insurance on a late payment claim, do we post that to the patient account? I do not. It doesn't belong to the patient. That interest payment is not their money. It's the practice's money for the payment being delayed. I don't post it in the practice management software. My deposit report is off that day by the 4-cent interest payment. That 4 cents belongs to the practice. Delta of Illinois, they're the only one not linked to our office. The Delta of Illinois causes problems all over, but that's a question we'll talk about in the Drive Live. Are the state rules, laws that are pertinent to dental insurance in the respective state board records, bylaws, or do they have to go by some general statement? I'm not sure, Dr. Dr. Gong, which rules you're talking about. It's going to depend if we're talking about coordination of benefits or we're talking about different things. Let me know specifically what you're looking for, and I'll get that answer to you. How do you access the calculator in the Facebook group? Go into the Facebook group. Along the top, you'll see a bunch of things that will say members and posts and videos and different subjects. The one on the far right will be group files. Go in the group files, and then you can search the group files and just type in calculator, and that should bring it up. It is also on our resources page. If we are in network with primary and out with secondary, the primary fully pays for the service. The secondary payment gets sent to the patient. Does the patient keep the money? They do. If you're out of network, and this is where the exception comes in, if you are out of network with one of the plans and they don't allow assignment of benefits, you're limited to collecting what the allowance is for the one that does allow assignment of benefits. So yes, you're in network with primary, they pay your full allowed fee. You submit the claim to secondary, the patient gets paid $150 because the secondary doesn't allow assignment of benefits. You're stuck collecting what the primary paid you. The patient keeps the check they got from the secondary. It does not belong to the practice. Some EOBs do not explicitly list patient portion. What's the best way to verify when you calculate? The only way to verify is to go allowed fee minus insurance payment. That's the patient portion. That's the only way to do it. And use the calculator if you're not sure. Is the lowest allowed per code? It is per line item. Absolutely. I do not do my calculations based on bulk payments on the total payment. I do it based on line item per code. Will the slides be available with the recording? They will. You will get an email with a link to the recording and a link to the slides available for download. Can you explain why the overpayment should not be posted to another line item? Because I want my line item accounting to be accurate. I'm not saying don't use some of the credit to pay for that other balance due on the other line. Absolutely do that. If you have $100 credit on one line and you owe me $80 on the other, at the end of the day, you only have a $20 credit. But I'm not going to line item apply that $80 to that line. I'm going to leave it as a $100 credit, and then in the account, that will offset itself automatically, just like any other credit or debit balance does. So I'm going to use the credit to pay for any balance owed, but I'm not going to apply it to that line item as a payment. Hopefully that makes sense, Stephanie. Is there a different term that insurance uses for maintenance of benefits or carve out? I've seen them use those. That's typically what they use. You may get reps who don't know what it is, but if you get up to a supervisor, they will. If you collect over your full fee and neither of the plans are self-funded, where does that overpayment go? Back to the secondary. You have to call the secondary, do an insurance refund request, wait to get the refund request letter or email, and then send the check in there with that. Do not just blankly mail a check without a refund request letter from the insurance company. It will never get credited to the right place. Do you always use line item? 100% of the time. Proper accounting technique is line item. Do you have a specific debit adjustment note that you add to the ledger when doing an adjustment to collect up to your UCR? Whatever the adjustment type was that was used to bring it down is the one I use to bring it back up. So if it was a delta adjustment that credited it, it will be a delta debit adjustment that offsets that, Beth. Hopefully that makes sense to you. That way my delta adjustments balance out accurately at the end of the year. How do you go about posting if primary paid on a comp filling but secondary downcodes to an amalgam? I use the allowed fee and the amount they paid. It doesn't matter what code they used. It's primary paid on a comp filling and paid 100 out of 200. Secondary said, oh no, it's an amalgam, we're paying 30. In the calculator, I put it in as the primary paid 100, the secondary paid 30. The downgrade doesn't matter. It's the amount they paid that matters, and that's what goes into the calculator. What is reduction of benefits? Coordination, we were told by the rep, that is not standard. What is it then? Reduction of benefits. I don't know if you mean maintenance of benefits, but a reduction of benefits would most likely be very similar to carve out, where they're going to determine what they would have paid and then pay the difference if there is a difference. Understand the posting of coordination when EOBs come in, but it's confusing figuring out the treatment plan. It is. The first couple times you do it, it's going to be tough. But after that, you know how the plans coordinate, and then you will be able to more accurately estimate. It's not going to be 100%, but it is what it is. But there are a couple more questions here, but we did run out of time. What I'm going to do is I get a printout of all the questions. I'm going to answer those questions, remaining couple questions, in the email that I send out to you guys tomorrow. So, I just want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. I really appreciate you all being here. I'm going to stop the screen share. I'm going to turn my camera on for a minute, but I appreciate you guys being here. Please continue to ask questions for the next minute or two while we go through this. I will answer every one of them in the email. And if I didn't answer them tonight and you didn't get to ask it before the session ends, go into the group, post your question there. I will most certainly answer it there. But thank you again, everybody. I hope you learned a lot. Have a wonderful evening. Have a great weekend. And I will see you guys in the group.